Welcome to NCSS Here for You. For over 50 years, Northwestern Counseling and Support Services has been providing access to quality psychosocial services to the residents of Franklin and Grand Isle counties. Over the years, as the needs of the community have changed, so too have the programs and services that we make available to assist children, adolescents, adults, families, and seniors. We take our role in the community seriously, and we strive to provide the highest quality services. According to Erik Erikson, a noted developmental psychologist, every person must pass through a series of 8 interrelated stages over the entire life cycle. NCSS provides a continuum of services to meet the needs of individuals who at any point seek assistance. NCSS's purpose is creating a stronger community, one person at a time. Now, let's get to today's show. I'm Joe Halco, Director of Community Relations for Northwestern Counseling and Support Services, and welcome to another episode of NCSS Here for You. Each month on this program, we discuss a topic of interest to local residents, and we do that with staff from one of the 3 direct services divisions. Our 3 service divisions are Behavioral Health Services, Children, Youth, and Family Services, and Developmental Services. And, on occasion, we have a member of our administrative staff discuss topics that affect all of our services. This month's episode is titled, Understanding Down Syndrome and the Buddy Walk. Down syndrome is the most commonly occurring chromosomal condition and occurs in approximately 1 out of every 733 births in people of all races and economic levels. The addition of the 3rd copy of the 21st chromosome alters the course of development, resulting in all people with Down syndrome experiencing cognitive delays. Today, we'll learn about Down syndrome, positive strategies for families who are the child's most important resource, support services, and the upcoming Buddy Walk, and more. To discuss the topic of Down syndrome in greater detail, I'm pleased to introduce this month's guests. They are Jean Danis-Gilman, NCSS Director of Developmental Services, Elaine Carpenter, NCSS Children's Integrated Services Early Intervention Program Coordinator, and Abby Austin, NCSS Community and Rehabilitation Treatment Community Support Worker. I'd like to welcome all of you to the program this month, and thanks for being here. Now, if we can start with, if you would describe Down syndrome and what are the causes of this condition?
Did you want to start?
It is 3 copies of the 21 chromosomes, where ideally it would be 2. And I think you gave the statistic already about the 1 in 733 births.
Mm-hmm. There are many different reasons why a child might be born with Down syndrome, and so the causes of them causes can be different. For whatever reason, there is something happens when the egg starts to develop, which causes that change on the 21st chromosome. So it's often associated with older parents, but the reality is that most children with Down syndrome are born to parents who are in their 20s and early 30s.
And how is Down syndrome diagnosed?
It's typically it can be diagnosed before a child is even born because there are some physical markers that are often observed on an ultrasound. So there may be that may be a clue. There is a blood test that is offered to pregnant women, which may show elevated levels of certain things in the blood, which indicate a higher probability of having a child with Down syndrome. It is most definitively diagnosed at birth when there are physical differences that are observable in the baby. It's interesting that there are only 2 physical characteristics that are common to all children who have Down syndrome, and that is they all have a lower muscle tone, meaning their muscles take longer to respond to a stimulation from the brain. And the other one is that their eyes have a slightly different shape. There are many more characteristics to Down syndrome, but not all children share that. So it's interesting that when you see a group of infants with Down syndrome, some of them there would have no way of knowing that they have Down syndrome.
And what are the changing dynamics within a family when caring for a child with Down syndrome?
When a family is aware that they are having a child with Down syndrome, there's a lot of changes that happen, as children, we think about children growing and developing. Parents are also growing and developing right along with their child, and so it's sometimes a bit of a steeper learning curve for parents when you suddenly are told that you have a child with Down syndrome. And Abby and I are both parents of children, young boys who have Down syndrome. So that's part of what you need to get, what you're getting used to, is the fact that you do have a child with a lifelong disability. And there definitely are stages of acceptance that parents go through when they're getting used to that. What was the question again, the full question?
Changing dynamics within a family when caring
within
for
a family, yeah. And I think that for extended family, like older siblings or grandparents, it is it can be kind of a shock. And it is hard for people to kind of get used to that, I think. But over time, what people come to realize is just the incredible joy and delight that these young children bring to a family, and certainly they enhance a family's life rather than, be detrimental to a family. So I think that's the biggest learning curve for families. Yeah.
And if I can jump in.
Yeah.
From my perspective, we have an older gentleman with Down syndrome that's been living with us for the past 12 years. And so talking to his family about some unique things that they went through with other siblings in the family, I think their challenges were they lived on a large farm and they had to think about the hazards for him along with his development. What are the things that you may be able to warn other typically developing kids about, and they don't have to worry, and now they really do. They have to put a different hat on and think about how do we keep this young man safe, but let him do all the same things that his siblings do, because I think with folks with disabilities, it's all about experiencing life the same way, only like you didn't have it at all. So it's really important. I think parents, the challenge they have is, I want my child to go to the camp that siblings go to the same TV shows or movie theaters and malls, and just making sure that you're doing all those same activities and helping, I think, siblings to understand.
And siblings are their biggest peers. They are, they're what they're with every day. I think some of our challenges were the physical issues in the beginning. The low muscle tone, that was very, very difficult. Where most kids, by the age of maybe 6 months, they're looking around and lifting their heads, and without PT and OT, I think that we were at about a year, I think almost a year. So the development compared to a child that doesn't have Down syndrome, that's the expectations. It was just completely different for us.
Yeah.
We actually got a book, I think it was Elaine's recommendation, and it sort of gave us the steps and what to look for. It may not happen, but what to look for, and it was very helpful because those mile markers we checked off in a book, and we were really good about keeping details, fingers, raising fingers. We forget sometimes that he has Down syndrome because we don't have a lot of physical issues anymore, and we don't, I guess emotionally, he's not where he should be, but he's getting there. So we're seeing a lot of, when I'm saying peer interaction, his brother, at this age, seeing what his brother did maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So that's been a challenge too, seeing a couple behaviors that were sort of like a little bit down the road. So, challenging behaviors.
Folks with Down syndrome can have a whole broad spectrum, you know, so there
Right.
can be folks that are individuals that are truly affected by a very low IQ, and you can also have folks with Down syndrome that have a very high IQ, that
Right.
are competitively working. There's been famous actors on television, you know, that are part of television shows. So it doesn't mean that that diagnosis means that that child is not going to grow up and live
Right.
independently. So I think that that's a really big message for
Yes.
young parents to understand as well.
Yeah.
And what are some of the strategies that families can use to enhance the life of the individual that's been diagnosed with Down syndrome? I know you've talked a little bit about some of the challenges because of the differences, but what are some of the, you know, what can be put in place to help enhance that person's
Yeah.
life
Early
each and every day?
intervention from birth, I mean, just, we hooked right up with NCSS immediately. And I really think that had we not, Levi wouldn't be thriving. As you know, he always has great potential, but I just think it would have been more challenging not having NCSS on board and all of our team. I'm very grateful.
Some of the services that are really important for infants with Down syndrome are physical therapy services. Because of the lower muscle tone, they tend to reach their motor milestones later, but physical therapy exercises can help to strengthen their muscles and make it easier for them to reach those milestones when they do. Occupational therapy, which helps with fine motor skills, feeding issues, speech therapy. Children with Down syndrome tend to have more difficulty learning to speak. And the earlier you start the intervention with a child, the better the outcome for that child. And we do know that children with Down syndrome are very strong visual learners. That's the part of the brain that is most well developed, and they know that because of the advances in PET scans and CT scans that show brain activity. So when children with Down syndrome are learning a new skill, they need to see it. They need to see other children doing the skill. They need to see, you know, their families practicing the skill. And they're very, very capable of learning, but it's going to take a little bit longer, and they're going to need some supports. They're going to need the visual supports. They're going to need the extra help. But they're certainly really good learners. They just don't learn at the same rate that other children do.
And then on the medical side, I think having that extra support to know what are some of the things to look for, to be aware of. As you talk about visual learning, a lot of children with Down syndrome have problems with their vision, some problems with their hearing. They have a higher expectancy or possibility of getting epilepsy, early dementia. There's a lot of medical pieces that go hand in hand, so it's really, and especially heart conditions. So it's really great when someone first have those children that they're getting kind of a specialist to take a look at that, and then they can know what they should keep an eye on as that child's developing and aging, because at different milestones there's different issues. I know with adults especially, Dr. William Hopkins, who's in Burlington, is a heart specialist, and he specializes in working with adults with Down syndrome. So he not only looks at the heart, but he also talks about the overall, you know, health of the individual and what things you might have to have closer concern on as the person ages. So it's great for a young family to know what are those things that I need to keep a close eye on, or if something pops up, I know who to turn to for that type of advice. I think that's really helpful.
And I can't stress enough how important it is, the support that you get from other families who have a child with Down syndrome, or an adult with Down syndrome, or a relative, because they really understand the disability, and it's really good to know what, if you have dealing with a certain issue, well, maybe what worked for your family, or what was helpful, you know, in this time. And certainly when you get into to schools and you're working with IEPs and goals for your child and educational services, it is really good to have support of other families and professionals.
Now, I know we talked a little bit about siblings earlier, but let's talk about the importance of the other siblings on the development of the child who has Down syndrome, and how critical that is in the entire mix.
Well, I was just going to mention,
Say-
Elaine,
yeah.
you were talking about kind of modeling how important that is. So I think when it comes to children in the home, being able to have siblings that are really part of that developmental process, so that they're modeling the best behavior, or they're modeling anything that you want that child to gain. And one instance, I remember that there was a young child with Down syndrome whose parent I was in contact with. And they'd struggled for several years on toilet training, and the child was getting older, and it was becoming very embarrassing to the family. And so that one child just did a sleepover with a typically developing child that they'd made friends with, and literally in one overnight, just because it's what my friend did, and it became something that was a learned behavior because it was modeled with someone who is exactly the same age, you know, just having fun on a sleepover. And it was that quick, like what you were saying, Elaine. It doesn't have to be that everything is so hard, but we have to kind of think about those steps, and modeling always seems to be the best way for children to learn from siblings. Hopefully it's positive modeling.
Oh, gosh.
Any other thoughts as far as
Yeah.
the sibling interaction? Or
It's just really important. It's
And we do have sibling workshops available at NCSS where siblings can be with other folks who are brothers and sisters of a developing child, because they may feel, well, you know, my brother gets all kinds of special attention, and I don't get that kind of attention. I don't go to special doctors. I don't have special parties. And so it helps those children as siblings kind of get together, like you said. Parent support, sibling support, it's really important. So if I know that you have a brother who also has Down syndrome, then we have that in common, and I can kind of learn from you what your frustrations are. And so I think with siblings, as parents, we want folks to be really welcoming and accepting and proud of their sibling, and they have to talk about that. It's something that needs to be really focused on.
Yeah. My son does not have a sibling who's near the same age. He has much older siblings. So in light of that, what a decision that we made was to have him start in a child care program maybe a little bit earlier than we would have if he'd had, you know, siblings his same age, so that he was around children his same age and could see their typical development and learn from them. So that was a decision that we made.
That worked for us too.
Yeah. Yeah.
now, we've talked a lot about the individual with Down syndrome. Now let's talk a little bit about the needs of the parents and with what they face when it comes to having the child. And Elaine, you talked a little earlier about some of the other outside supports, but again, I ask this question for maybe a lot of young parents who have just learned that perhaps they have a child with Down syndrome, and they don't quite know what they're going to face and how can they get supports to help them. If you could just explain some of what helps a parent.
Your parent. I think one of the biggest helps that certainly worked for my family, and I know has been very helpful for other families, is connecting with the early intervention program through NCSS. And it's a program that will help families learn about their child's issues, and will arrange services for the child, such as physical therapy or occupational therapy or speech therapy, and really work with the family. You know, what are your questions? What are your issues? How can we help to connect you with resources? And really giving some support to that family. And we work with children right up until the age of 3. And at age 3, children will transition to services through a school. And so we help families make that transition to school-based services. So as well as support from other families who are also raising young children with Down syndrome. I think those are really important.
And are there particular support groups within Franklin Grand Isle counties specifically, or is it more of a...
I'm not aware of one in Franklin County, but there's one in Chittenden.
There is
a big group in Chittenden that...
and there are also groups here in the Franklin County area, but I think it's pretty vast. It's not just children with Down syndrome parents. It's you know, children, parents with children with special needs.
Sure, sure.
There actually are two parents that are very active in our agency who have a college-bound student with Down syndrome who are very interested in starting a parent support group in Franklin County. So, possibly folks who have any interest in getting together and making a parent group with this family could contact. You could give them our contact information because I think they would be very excited to start a parent support group. So that would be great.
Sure, and if anyone out there is interested, they can certainly contact our Community Relations Department, and I can get the word to the appropriate parties, and you would contact us at 524-6555. That's 524-6555. Now, on an annual basis, NCSS organizes what is known as the Buddy Walk, and now this year it'll be called the 2012 Buddy Walk of Northwestern Vermont. If you could explain to viewers the importance of why we do this and what it means to all those who get involved in this particular event each year. And by the way, this year the event will be held on Saturday, September the 15th at the Collins Purley Sports and Fitness Center. But if you could just let the viewers know a little bit about the event and what it means.
Do you want to talk about that, Jean?
Well, I remember the history actually of it was that several years ago, when the event stopped happening from another group in town, we had parents that called us and said we really would like to start this again because the proceeds do go towards Down syndrome research and educational materials. So if folks were to call the National Down Syndrome Society, then they could receive pamphlets, information, be online, get help, from another organization outside of us, much larger than us. But we felt it was really important locally to be part of national research. So we were really glad to get involved and to make sure those proceeds went in that direction. And last year we'd grown to over 200 participants and we're really excited about that. But clearly when you see at the event, it's primarily families and extended family of folks with Down syndrome, and so people really come together as a community and wanting to support the event. So we're just hoping that it continues to grow as people learn about it and realize how dedicated folks are in this area to kind of come together. And I think it's a place where families come together and parents can come together, for the same cause. And so we like to have a lot of fun. There's music supplied there, and we face painting and
Bouncy houses.
Bouncy houses, yes, and food and drink and things like that, T-shirts. So we really try to get people excited about the day, and we always hope for a great day for people to get out there and do their walking. So folks do sponsor individuals. So if I wanted to walk, I would have a sponsor sheet, and I would ask people to sponsor me for the walk that day, and that's how the proceeds are collected, type of thing.
I appreciate seeing NCSS staff and support people there. Knowing their busy schedules, they're there every year.
Yeah.
And a lot of their families are there.
Yeah, it is a great event, and certainly for an extremely worthy cause. And to Jean's point, I think it's important that an organization like NCSS take the lead in this sort of a walk, because again, whether it's educational materials that we're talking about, of course the ongoing research, which of course costs an awful lot of money to try to find ways to assist individuals who have Down syndrome. So again, that'll be on Saturday, September the 15th in St. Albans at the Collins Purley Sports and Fitness Center. Now, we talked a little bit about some of the services that are available, but if we could just maybe go back and elaborate a little more about anyone who has a child who has been diagnosed, some of the services that are available and where they can find them, just to be able to help them.
Sure.
Right from the beginning.
I think really good resource for families who have a new infant diagnosed with Down syndrome is the child's pediatrician. Most of the referrals to our early intervention program do come from either the hospital or the pediatrician. We work closely with medical providers in our community so that they're aware of services for children with Down syndrome. So they tend to be the ones who make the referrals. And a pediatrician, the relationship that a family has with a pediatrician is really key in assuring that a child with Down syndrome is going to get the appropriate medical care, and just building that relationship with the child and with the family. So the pediatrician is a great place to start.
And there are a few in this area that are so invested that they also take part in the Buddy Walk, and they go above and beyond to assist with getting services that.
And Elaine had mentioned that at age 3, when children start to become part of the school system, that they lose some of those early intervention services, but also at that point they're eligible for case management services through developmental services. So that's where folks start to have someone involved in their life, and it's great because the services work together. So the folks that work with Elaine work closely with our case managers, so they know about this young person and maybe what some of their struggles in the family are. So the case management follows them while they go through their school-age life. And then at the time that they're starting to get ready to graduate from high school, we get involved in a really much larger way and work with the family on supporting that individual as a graduate and maybe life after school. And we do have 2 individuals that are involved in actually going to Johnson State College and the College STEPS program, so we're really excited about that as an opportunity for young folks. But also work and having a job, and a lot of folks with disabilities, as they grow up, they want have the same expectations. They want to have their own place, maybe move out of mom and dad's. No one wants to think about that now, but if that's your goal, you know, then we're working with folks towards that goal. So they have the supports they need that are lifelong supports. So we actually support people right through their elder years. So it really is the great part, I think, about working with the agency is that we make these relationships really early on, and it goes all the way up through the person's life.
I think the important thing with what all of you have said today is it's really about the individual gaining as much independence as they can possibly garner in their particular life. And I think that's important because I think a lot of times people looking from the outside in may not feel that these individuals could be too independent, but I think the critical thing is with a lot of the services that are provided, that's what everyone is striving to do, is to make the individual live as normal a life as they can and as independently as they possibly can.
Sure. There have been tremendous advances in the world of education and how to work with young children with disabilities and how to teach them, and we're finding now that children with disabilities, and particularly with Down syndrome, are making tremendous gains educationally. And so it is not at all unreasonable to think that these children will be able to go to college, and some children are now going to college with supports and with accommodations and having that experience and being able to have a job and to live independently. So that's exciting.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, believe it or not, our time is up for this month already. And I certainly want to thank my special guests for being on the show this month, Jean Danis-Gilman, Elaine Carpenter, and Abby Austin, and sharing their insights on the topic of Down syndrome. I also want to thank you, the viewer, for spending time with us again this month. I'm Joe Halco, and I'll be back next month with another episode of NCSS Here for You. This has been another episode of NCSS Here for You. We hope that you found today's discussion informative and educational. For over 50 years, Northwestern Counseling and Support Services has been providing access to quality psychosocial services to the residents of Franklin and Grand Isle counties. Over the years, as the needs of the community have changed, so too have the programs and services that we make available to assist children, adolescents, adults, families, and seniors. Thanks once again for tuning in this month. NCSS's purpose remains creating a stronger community, one person at a time.